Hello, welcome to the session that will overview the outstanding book, Teaching for Deeper Learning, Tools to Engage Students in Meaning Making by J. McTeague and Harvey Silver. I'm Diane Oplinger, Gifted Consultant at the Stark County ESC. I've led 2 virtual book studies using this book this past year, and participants have found the book engaging and extremely useful. This session does award gifted credit. However, please note, the information contained in this book is for every child and students of all abilities, not just gifted kids. As the book says, far too often our students attain only a superficial level of knowledge that fails to prepare them for deeper challenges in school and beyond. The authors propose a solution: teach students to make meaning for themselves. The authors highlight 7 research-based thinking skills with several tools to teach each of the skills. The sample tools are given for all grade levels and academic subjects. The 7 skills highlighted are conceptualizing, note-making and summarizing, comparing, reading for understanding, predicting and hypothesizing, visualizing and graphic representation, and perspective taking and empathizing. We'll take a look at each of these 7 skills and one or more of the tools suggested for each skill. Any samples shown in the slides are available in the additional materials folder shown below the link to this video. Note, there are many more samples given in the book for each of the skills and the hows. You may want to purchase the book at some point in the future so that you have access to all of those samples. Also, while we're going over these, think of yourself as a learner. And as we discuss the options, decide which of them would have helped you make meaning as a learner as you were in a student capacity. The first skill is conceptualizing. It's defined as using facts, examples, observations, and experiences to construct an understanding of important concepts and conceptual relationships. Here are the 6 hows for conceptualizing. Concept attainment, which is creating concepts through comparison of attributes. A concept definition map, which is similar to concept attainment, except you have a visual organizer to create your written definition. A study in, which is processing factual information to promote understanding and retention of concepts. Adding up the facts. So you take facts to generalizations and then vice versa, taking generalizations to facts. Connect the concepts is the most complex. This is looking at relationships between concepts. Here's an example of a concept attainment chart that you could create. Note there's a link to a birdseed video in the right-hand corner. That is a presentation Ian Bird did to show how you would determine the differences between similes and metaphors. If you want to take a look at that later, that link also will be in the materials section of this presentation. Concept attainment is basically teachers are going to challenge students to define concepts for themselves by comparing examples and non-examples to determine critical attributes. It's a little bit like playing detective. So here's one if you're going to try to figure out a definition for personification. This is a yes-no concept attainment table. So you would give the students these examples and then have them decide is it a yes example or is it a no example. And they would maybe work independently or work in small groups or in pairs to determine where they would go. So you give them money talks, and is that yes or no? And then perhaps the dog got a new owner when his owner died. After you're done placing all of them in your yes and no examples, then you would have the students determine their definition, and in this case, a definition of personification. These yes and no examples can be in any format. So you could even do this with younger students, where you can use pictures, you could use text, you could use objects. Again, probably the most important thing is writing the definition at the end. Note making and summarizing is skill number 2. As you can see, they say this is to capture, organize, and synthesize important information in order to clarify big ideas and important details. The hows for note making and summarizing are window notes. This is where you have squares that you fill in information as you are listening or reading new material, and you will be note making to generate questions, personal reactions, and connections. Math notes are very similar. You're going to analyze and plan for to solve a complex word problem. When we've done this book study, these two are probably the two most popular skills or hows that were ever used throughout the whole book, and the teachers that used them found them extremely effective. There's interactive note making, where you're helping the students extract the most important information. Webbing, for your visual learners that like that non-linear way to see relationships between big ideas. 4-2-1 summarize is extremely effective. I'll show you how that works in just a second, but it's a way for students to learn how to identify essential information. And then awesome summaries, which uses the acronym AWESOME it's a checklist to make sure summaries are clear and accurate. Here's an example of window notes. You can use this for all ages. This one is taken again directly from the book. It will be in your materials section. I know it's hard to read. But after reading or listening to information about tornadoes, the first box is filled out with facts. Then the connections, again, it doesn't matter what order, but the facts are listed there, what the student gathered. Connections, questions, and feelings and reactions. One thing about window notes and math notes, you can't copy, because this is all your personal reactions to that writing or to that information that was shared. Math notes look very similar. This is how you would analyze a word problem. Again, you have the facts, the questions, the steps, the diagram, and then your final solution at the end. 4-2-1 summarize. The way this works is that you read a text or listen to information. Students review it and then decide what are the 4 most important points. They would do that independently. So in this case, you see the one student's 4 most important points about the gold rush. Then those are recorded. Then they are paired. Students are in pairs, and they compare their ideas and come up with their 2 most important ideas. So technically, they're taking 8 ideas and narrowing that down to 2. So you can see how these 4 ideas of one student then got joined together with these pairs of students. There's 2. Then the pairs of students are then paired together, and you come up with the most important idea. After that, the students write a summary paragraph. This could be your choice, whether they write the paragraph individually, in pairs, or in their group of 4. The third skill presented by the authors is in comparing. And while I think we all know what comparing is, the authors assert that teaching students how to compare is the biggest issue here. There are many hows in comparing. Again, you'll see a link to a birdseed TV showing how you could compare and contrast and then do a writing assignment. The hows that they use are describe first, compare second, which I think we often skip when we have students do a Venn diagram. We don't have them doing the describing thoroughly before looking for similarities and differences. Meaningful and manageable criteria. This is where you focus attention on important aspects, not just the minuscule details. Top hat organizer, we're going to see in just a minute. This and as well as the comparison matrix are visual organizers to guide your thinking. What can you conclude? Compare and conclude matrix. I'll show you a sample of that. And a community circle, which is a great way to have a conversation and compare when you're in a whole class setting. Here's again directly from the book, the example of a top hat organizer. In this case, comparing realism and naturalism. You can see the differences are at the top, the similarities are at the bottom. What's nice about this is it's similar to a Venn diagram, but it can organize the similarities and differences. They can be compared right next to each other. There's more room to write. And I think it also helps you avoid inconsequential facts. When you have the words like unique, etc., I think the students will see they need more information than they're both men or they're both whatever. We know that students do that very often. And then the similarities are at the bottom. Here's an example of a compare and conclude matrix. This one allows you to compare more than two items. You have to first know the common purpose. So for example, in this one, let's say that you need to start a fruit farm in Ohio and you want to know what is the best fruit for your fruit farm. So if you entered your data would be specific to your problem. You enter your data. Again, the most important part would be the conclusion at the end. Here's another way to use a compare and conclude matrix. What shape is this? You can see the shape there to the right. So you would fill out this matrix and then you come to the conclusion that you think it's a rhombus because it has 4 congruent sides but no right angles. It's one of those things that I don't think you would use that all the time, but it's a great way for students to solve problems, to think about their thinking. The fourth skill is reading for understanding. I think with our focus these days on literacy, we all think we are doing this, but this is a little bit different than just literacy or phonics or whatever you're thinking of involves reading. These are a specific set of practical and proven tools and strategies for helping all readers develop the skills that make the most proficient readers use to make meaning when they read. These would be power previewing, which is like a power skim. It's a directed skim, a scavenger hunt, looking for key information, single sentence summaries. So you would stop and actually have those as you're reading. You might be using note making and summarizing while you're doing that. Reading stances, one of my favorites. It's how you look and respond to text through different lenses. Reading for meaning, students practice all 3 phases of meaning before, during, and after. Here's how they describe power previewing, how to power skim a text. You prowl for clues, you pencil in key information, you pry open your memory, you personalize, and you predict. A key thing here is that you revisit these after the reading is done to see what did your predictions come true. So that is important. This helps activate prior knowledge, build a pre-reading sense of what the text is about, and create a conceptual framework into which new information that's gathered can be integrated. It must be modeled. All of these must be modeled. Sometimes I think we think students know how to compare, they know how to contrast, they know how to skim. They don't. It must be taught. The 4 reading stances, another one of the tools given for this section. You take these 4 stances: literal, which is to form an initial impression of the text; interpretive would be seeking deeper meaning to embedded themes and concepts; personal, you're going to connect your personal experiences with the selection; and then the critical, questioning the author and the text evaluatively. This is an interesting chart in that it shows how to use these and gives you questions to do this with fiction selections and nonfiction selections. The fifth skill that is taught is predicting and hypothesizing. Both predicting and hypothesizing engage students in the active construction of meaning by asking them to think speculatively and then test the strength and validity of their ideas against results or new evidence. Just to clarify, to predict is an attempt to foretell an outcome before it occurs. A hypothesis is a proposed explanation. The hows for this section, prediction and hypothesis-based hooks. We all know kids love to be hooked into a lesson. So there are many that are listed in the book. What if? Yes, but why? I love yes, but why. I use that with my own children. Yes, this happens, but why? Why? Yes, the water comes up the straw when you suck on it. Why? Questions that puzzle, data that teases, discrepant events, and crystal ball. Inductive learning, where students will analyze bits of information, identify patterns, and make predictions. Mystery, where they will piece together clues and then present with mysteries and challenge the students to develop and test possible explanations. If then clarifies what a hypothesis is and outlines a process for generating and testing the hypothesis. Here's an example of an if-then that could be used with a student. It's a testable answer to a scientific question. So once a scientist has a scientific question, then they research what is already known on the topic. Then they use that information to form a tentative answer. Sometimes we call that an educated guess. So this could be an example we could do with lots of different things in a classroom. I think having that template there helps the students, again, start creating patterns in their mind of how they work through things. Again, with this section, I would assure students that it's not guessing, because notice they have to use the information to form a tentative answer. It's not just guessing. The sixth skill is visualizing and graphic representation. One I think we all thought had been covered extensively with other things, but the authors give lots and lots of examples to use in all areas. Their definition is that it facilitates meaning making because the very act of converting information into a visual form involves transformation, which requires active processing by the learner. So we may have heard it, but now we're going to visualize it. So we've now got two channels to the brain, the visual and the verbal, and those just increase the power of each other. The hows for this section are don't just say it, display it. Incorporate relevant images into classroom presentations. We've all heard the saying, and a picture is worth 1,000 words. That's what this one is getting at. Split screen, students develop their own image and explain the relevance so that while they're listening, maybe this is note-taking, making, maybe it's while they're reading, they draw a picture and then explain why they drew the picture they drew. Mind's eye, you create mental pictures before reading. Visualizing vocabulary, you create images that represent conceptual understanding. Graphic organizers, these are some examples of the ones that there are shown in the book. Advanced organizers, story maps, concept maps, student-generated visual organizers are all shown there. This could be a split screen example. You take this is on quadrilaterals. So you organize the info into chunks, present a single chunk, have the students present their thoughts visually. So in other words, the first one is a square. So you have them sketch it out, and then they could do it individually. They suggest perhaps doing in groups, and you write their conclusions in the right column. What are the big ideas? And then you repeat all the steps until all the chunks of the information have been presented. Here's a concept map. A concept map is a graphic organizer that's used to organize ideas and assimilate new learning. It's really, really helpful when you're faced with complex or abstract material. I'm not sure that matter, showing how it's divided into weight and volume, is complex or abstract, but I know this would have helped me when I was a learner, just visualizing the differences between the two. The last skill that's presented is perspective taking and empathizing. In this case, it's involving the human capacity to step out of our own egocentric frame and explore different points of view. To compare the two, perspective requires us to be open-minded and to carefully consider views that may be different than our own. It's both critical and analytical. Empathy, it's more personal and emotional. Here are the hows that they give. Questioning prompts. These would just be simple prompts or questions that engage learners in diverse perspectives and empathizing. Putting the you in content. Look at content through the lens of your own experiences. Perspective chart. Viewing content through perspectives of various stakeholders. Meeting of the minds or mock trial. This is where the students would assume roles of historic figures and literary characters to discuss ideas. A day in the life, students become people, ideas, and things that they're learning about. This one is a great chart for using perspective and empathy across the curriculum. Oftentimes, I think I'll just use math. We don't think we can do that in math. This chart, which again will be in your materials folder, can show you how you could use it in math, or how you could use it in science, or how you could use it in social studies. In health, you develop a personal fitness program for a middle-aged client who is sedentary office worker with arthritic knees. Your program should include aerobic, anaerobic, and flexibility exercises. Again, not something they would think of necessarily. They're thinking of themselves as an adolescent, doesn't have knee problems, etc. So you might have to think of it, just puts them in with a different perspective. One of my favorite ones is meeting of the minds, and that's where you use unrelated characters. They should be famous characters. They could be literary. They could be fictional. They could be real life people, and you bring them together to discuss, or what do you think they would think of a topic, about a topic. So, for example, great minds collaborate. If Mark Twain and Charles Dickens co-wrote a book, what would it be like? Or they could advise. What advice would Marie Curie or Alexander Fleming have on this pandemic? I've also used this where they're at a dinner table and you can invite 3 historic figures to dinner, and what would be your questions? So the students have to know about the character or the person, and then they'd have to have enough information about what they might think about that topic. It's a great conversation starter and really higher level thinking. So we've actually made it through all 7 of the skills presented in this book. Thank you for hanging in there. Hopefully you've seen or heard enough to pick up a new strategy or 2 to try in your own classroom, or the desire to want to know more. Also, there's a surprise. If you are one of the first 10 people to email me at my email address, diane.oplinger@apps.spark.org, if you send me an email and with your building name and request a book, I'll send you a free copy of this book through the courier. If you would like to discuss any of these ideas further, or anything about Gifted in general, please join my unsession, which is next Thursday, June 17th at 1:30. You will get gifted PD hours for that unsession as well. So happy summer. Enjoy the time off, rejuvenate, restore yourself, and be ready to go next fall. See you in September.